I had 30 seconds before the appetizers arrived at table 7 and 3 bullets arrived in his spine. My fingers trembled as I pressed the pen to the napkin, the ink bleeding into the expensive linen like a wound. The fabric felt too delicate, too white, like it might betray me before I could betray the silence. Around me, the crimson pearl pulsed with the quiet hum of power. Silverware against bone china, hushed conversations in 3 languages, the rustle of designer fabric against butter-soft leather. Outside, Manhattan's November rain hammered the windows. But in here, everything was controlled, climate-perfect, airless. I approached table 7 like I was walking into a firing squad. Moretti Nozaki sat facing the entrance, his position deliberate, tactical. He looked like violence wrapped in civility. Angular face, dark hair pushed back from his forehead. A charcoal suit that probably cost more than my brother's next round of chemotherapy. His hand rested near his wine glass, still, patient like a predator conserving energy. Across from him, Emily Kim laughed at something he'd said, leaning forward with practiced grace. Her red dress clung to her like spilled wine. Her hair was pulled into a sleek bun, diamond studs catching the amber light and scattering it across the table. She looked like a woman celebrating her future. She was. Just not the one Moretti thought they were building. 17 minutes ago, I'd heard her arrange his murder. Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comments where you are watching from, hit the subscribe button and turn on post notification as I have another beautiful story for you tomorrow and I do not want you to miss it. The private dining corridor at the Crimson Pearl wasn't really private. It was a glass-walled passage connecting the main dining room to the VIP suites, lined with abstract art and recessed lighting that made everything look like it belonged in a museum. I'd been sent to deliver champagne to Suite 4, balancing the silver tray on one hand, my other steadying the neck of the bottle. I was passing Suite 2 when I heard the voice. Female, low, speaking in clipped English with a Korean accent I recognized from 3 months of serving her. 3 dots. Spine, left shoulder blade, right kidney. I froze. The champagne bottle wobbled. I pressed my back against the wall, just out of sight of the doorway and held my breath. Emily Kim's voice continued, sharp and businesslike. The moment he stands for the toast. Make it clean. I want him dead before he hits the floor. A male voice responded, rough and familiar. Dante Nozaki. I'd served him twice this month. Same dark eyes as Moretti, same dangerous smile but hungrier. Crueler. And the girl at the bar? The one he brought. Collateral. I don't care. Just make sure Moretti doesn't leave that room breathing. My heart slammed against my ribs. I couldn't move. Couldn't think. The tray was suddenly too heavy, the bottle slipping in my grip. I thought about Marcus in the children's ward at Mount Sinai, his 4 drip beeping out the rhythm of my failure to save him fast enough. I thought about the hospital bills stacked on my kitchen counter like a monument to everything I couldn't afford. I thought about the unspoken rule of my job. See nothing, hear nothing, be nothing. But I also thought about Moretti Nozaki 3 weeks ago, after I'd broken down crying in the service hallway when Marcus's doctor called with the new treatment plan. He'd found me there, asked what was wrong. I'd told him, stupidly, desperately, and he'd handed me $500 bills without a word. Not pity. Not charity. Just acknowledgement. I didn't know if he was a good man. I knew he was a dangerous one. But I knew he didn't deserve to die without knowing it was coming. I moved before I could talk myself out of it. I slipped away from Suite 2, delivered the champagne to Suite 4 with shaking hands, and returned to the main dining room. I grabbed a napkin from the service station. Found a pen. My hand wouldn't stop trembling. The ink bled and smudged, but the words were clear enough. Your fiancé ordered the hit. 3 red dots on your back. Now I was crossing the dining room toward table 7, the napkin folded in my palm, my throat so tight I could barely breathe. Emily saw me first. Her eyes tracked me with mild disinterest, the way wealthy people look at furniture. Moretti didn't look up. He was cutting into his steak, the knife moving with surgical precision. I reached the table. Placed my hand on the edge to steady myself. Slid the napkin beneath his wine glass. Can I get you anything else, Mr. Nozaki? My voice didn't shake. That was a miracle. For one terrible heartbeat he didn't react. His hand paused mid-cut. Then his dark eyes flicked to the napkin. He set down his knife. Picked up the wine glass. Read the note beneath it. His expression didn't change. Not a flicker. But his gaze shifted, over Emily's shoulder toward the corridor where I'd heard the conversation. Then back to me. He took a slow sip of wine, set the glass down, and met my eyes for the first time since I'd started working here. "Thank you," he said quietly. Then he stood lifting his glass. "A toast." Emily smiled, confused but indulgent. "Moretti, we haven't even." 3 red laser dots bloomed across his back like poisonous flowers. One at his spine. One at his left shoulder blade. One above his right kidney. Moretti's eyes locked on mine. His lips moved, forming a single word I could read even across the noise and chaos that was about to begin. "Run." Everything happened in the space between heartbeats. Moretti's hand shot out and flipped the table. Wine exploded across white linen, plates shattering against marble as the heavy wood crashed onto its side. Emily screamed, stumbling backward in her heels. The first gunshot cracked through the air like thunder, and the window behind where Moretti had been sitting spiderwebbed with bullet holes. I dropped to the floor, my knees hitting hard enough to bruise. Around me, the restaurant descended into chaos. Screams, the crash of overturned chairs, the percussion of gunfire so loud it felt like my skull was splitting open. I couldn't think. Couldn't breathe. I crawled toward the bar on instinct, my hands slipping on something wet that might have been wine or blood. More shots. Closer this time. I looked up and saw them. 3 men in server uniforms, the same black and white I was wearing, except they had guns instead of trays. One of them was Marco, the sommelier who'd been working here for 6 months. He raised his weapon toward the overturned table where Moretti had taken cover. Then Moretti's bodyguards moved. 2 men in dark suits materialized from positions I hadn't even noticed, weapons drawn, returning fire with brutal efficiency. Marco's chest bloomed red. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. I pressed myself against the bar, hands over my ears, trying to make myself smaller, invisible, anything. But then a hand closed around my wrist, strong, uncompromising, and yanked me upright. "Moretti." His face was spattered with something dark, his expression carved from stone. "Move," he said and dragged me toward the kitchen. We ran. He kept his body between me and the shooters, one hand gripping mine, the other holding a gun I hadn't seen him draw. The kitchen doors burst open. Chefs scattered, pots clattering to the floor. Moretti didn't slow down. He pulled me past the line cooks, past the walk-in freezer, past the pastry station where desserts sat half-decorated and forgotten. Behind us, gunfire echoed through the dining room. Glass shattered. Someone was screaming in Italian. We hit the delivery bay at full speed. The metal door slammed open, cold November air hitting my face like a slap. A black SUV idled in the alley, engine running, rear door already open. Moretti shoved me inside and followed, slamming the door as the driver punched the accelerator. Through the rain-streaked window, I saw Emily Kim standing at the restaurant entrance, phone pressed to her ear, her red dress vivid against the amber light. She wasn't running. Wasn't hiding. She was watching us leave, and the look on her face wasn't fear. It was fury. The SUV didn't stop until we reached a building that looked like it was built to survive a war. All glass and concrete, brutalist angles cutting into the Manhattan skyline, 40 stories of fortress overlooking Central Park. The lobby was empty except for 2 men in tactical gear who didn't bother hiding their weapons. They opened our doors before the vehicle fully stopped. Moretti climbed out, straightening his blood-spattered cuffs like nothing had happened. "Bring her up." One of the guards gripped my elbow, not rough but not gentle either, and guided me toward a private elevator. The doors were steel-reinforced, the kind you see in banks. We rode up in silence. Moretti stood perfectly still, checking his phone, his jaw tight. I counted the floors. 28. 35. 40. The penthouse was exactly what I'd expected and nothing like it. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Central Park, the city lights spreading out like scattered diamonds. But the interior was cold. Minimalist furniture, steel beams, concrete walls. It felt less like a home and more like a command center. Security monitors lined one wall, showing feeds from what looked like every corner of the building. A man emerged from a side room. Japanese, early 40s, wearing a suit as expensive as Moretti's but somehow sharper, more severe. His eyes swept over me with clinical assessment. "Takashi," Moretti said. "Search her." My stomach dropped. Wait, I didn't. "Phone first." Takashi held out his hand. I pulled my phone from my apron pocket with shaking fingers. He took it, powered it down, removed the SIM card, and dropped both pieces into a metal box that sealed with a magnetic lock. Then he gestured for me to stand. The search was thorough and humiliating. He found my keys, a chapstick, $17 in tips, and my inhaler. He held up the inhaler, examining it under the light. Albuterol, I said quickly. I have asthma. Takashi handed it to Moretti, who turned it over in his hands before setting it on the glass coffee table. Then Moretti looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the calculation behind his eyes. Your brother, he said. Marcus Brown. 12 years old. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Mount Sinai Hospital, room 847. My blood turned to ice. How do you? I paid off his medical debt this afternoon. All of it. $247,000. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. Which means I own his treatment now. His doctors, his medication, his chance at survival. Do you understand what I'm telling you, Helen? I understood perfectly. I wasn't a guest. I was collateral. They came at 2 a.m. I was lying on a leather sofa in what Moretti called the secure room. Windowless, reinforced walls, a single door that locked from the outside. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marco's chest exploding, saw Emily's cold smile, saw those 3 red dots blooming on Moretti's back. The first explosion shook the building. I sat up, heart hammering. Then came the gunfire, automatic weapons close, getting closer. I ran to the door and pounded on it. Let me out. What's happening? The door flew open. Takashi grabbed my arm and pulled me into the main room. The penthouse had transformed into a war zone. Guards crouched behind furniture, returning fire toward the elevator bank where smoke billowed and muzzle flashes lit up the darkness. Moretti stood behind a concrete pillar, gun raised, his face carved from shadow and fury. How did they find us? He shouted at Takashi. I don't know. We swept the building. There's no... Takashi stopped mid-sentence, his eyes snapping to me. Then to the coffee table where my inhaler still sat. He dove for it, snatched it up, and twisted the plastic chamber. It separated with a crack. Something small and metallic fell into his palm. A tracker. No bigger than a grain of rice, but glowing faintly red. Moretti's head whipped toward me. You brought them here. I didn't. I swear I didn't know. My voice broke. I would never. She's working with them. Takashi raised his gun, pointing it directly at my chest. She led them straight to us. No. I backed against the wall, hands up. I'm not. Please, I didn't know it was there. Moretti crossed the space between us in 2 strides. He grabbed my jaw, forcing me to look at him. His eyes were black with rage. Give me one reason not to put a bullet in your head right now. Because I can tell you everything. The words tumbled out desperately. Everything I heard. The full plan. Emily, Dante, all of it. But you have to promise me Marcus stays safe. You have to swear it. Behind us, more gunfire. Someone screamed. Moretti's grip tightened, then released. Takashi. Rear exit. Now. We ran through smoke and chaos, down a service stairwell I hadn't known existed. My lungs burned. We burst into an underground garage where an armored SUV waited, engine already running. Moretti shoved me inside and climbed in after me. The vehicle lurched forward, tires squealing as we rocketed up the exit ramp and into the street. Inside the car, Moretti turned to me, his gun now pressed against my knee. Talk. Everything. And if I think you're lying even once, you'll watch me make the call to pull your brother's life support. Understand? I understood. I started talking. The safe house was in Tribeca, hidden inside a building that looked abandoned from the outside but was anything but. Steel-reinforced door. Bulletproof windows. 3 separate security systems. Moretti swept the apartment himself before letting me inside, checking every corner, every vent, every shadow. Sit, he said, gesturing to the kitchen island. I sat. My whole body was shaking now, adrenaline finally crashing. That's when I noticed the blood, dark and wet, soaking through the sleeve of my uniform where I'd scraped my arm against something sharp during the escape. The wound wasn't deep, but it was long, angry, still bleeding. Moretti returned with a first aid kit. He set it on the counter, rolled up my sleeve and began cleaning the gash with antiseptic. His hands were steady, surprisingly gentle. I watched his face, The hard line of his jaw, the way his eyes focused with almost surgical precision. This close, I could see a scar along his temple, barely visible. Old Emily and Dante, I said quietly. They're planning to get married. His hands paused for just a moment, then continued wrapping gauze around my arm. When? After you're dead. They've already planned it. A private ceremony at the Nozaki estate in Westchester. Dante takes over the family with Emily as his advisor. She brings her father's connections, the Italian networks. He provides legitimacy as your blood heir. Dante's not my heir. He's a reckless idiot who'd burn the empire down in 6 months. That's what they're counting on. Emily's father wants someone controllable. Dante thinks he'll be the boss, but she's the one pulling the strings. I swallowed hard. There's something else. The baby she's carrying. It's not yours. Moretti's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his skin. He finished tying off the bandage with more force than necessary. Dante's. Yes. He stepped back, bracing his hands on the counter, head bowed. For a long moment he said nothing. When he finally looked up, his eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them. You saved my life tonight, Helen. You also led assassins directly to me. The question is whether those two things balance out. He moved closer, studying my face. I can get you out. New identity, new city, enough money to take care of your brother from a distance. You never have to see this world again. Is that what you want? I thought about Marcus. About the hospital room that had become his entire universe. About the way he'd looked at me last week and asked if he was going to die. No, I said. Not until Marcus is safe. Not until I know he's going to live. Something shifted in Moretti's expression. Not quite a smile. Almost respect. Then we have a deal. The training facility was 3 levels below the safe house, accessible only by a private elevator that required both a key card and a fingerprint scan. When the doors opened, I stepped into what looked like a military bunker. Concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, gun racks lining one side, a shooting range stretching into darkness at the far end. If you're staying in this world, Moretti said, handing me a Glock 19, you need to know how to survive it. The gun was heavier than I expected. I'd never held a weapon before. My hands shook as I tried to grip it properly. Wrong. Moretti moved behind me, his chest against my back, his arms coming around to adjust my stance. Feet shoulder width. Dominant hand high on the grip. Support hand wrapped around it, not underneath. His hands covered mine, repositioning my fingers. You're not asking permission. You're taking control. His breath was warm against my ear. I could smell gun oil and leather and something darker, more expensive. My pulse hammered in my throat, and it wasn't from fear. Now, he said quietly, breathe out and squeeze. Don't pull. Squeeze. I fired. The recoil jolted through my arms and the bullet went wide, hitting the concrete wall instead of the target. But I didn't drop the gun. Again. We trained for hours. He taught me to shoot, to reload, to clear a jam. He showed me where to aim to stop someone without killing them, and where to aim when killing was the only option. His instructions were clinical, brutal, necessary. But every time he touched me, correcting my stance, steadying my aim, the air between us grew heavier. On the 3rd day in the armory while I was reloading magazines, he caught my wrist. You're getting better. Good enough to survive? Good enough to be dangerous. His thumb brushed across my pulse point and I knew he could feel how fast my heart was racing. Are you afraid of me, Helen? I should have been. I should have been terrified. But when I looked up at him, at this man who killed without hesitation, who controlled empires, who held my brother's life in his hands, all I felt was want. No, I whispered. I'm afraid of how much I don't want to leave. He kissed me then, hard and hungry, pressing me back against the gun rack. His hands tangled in my hair, and I tasted danger and desire and the promise of a life I'd never imagined wanting. When we broke apart, I knew there was no going back. I stood outside Mount Sinai Hospital at 3 p.m., exactly where Moretti told me to be. Marcus was inside, stable, guarded by 2 of Takashi's men disguised as orderlies. I'd visited him an hour earlier, held his hand, told him everything would be okay. The lie tasted like ash. The black sedan pulled up within minutes. 2 men got out. Dante's muscle, I recognized one from the restaurant. They didn't draw weapons. Didn't need to. One grabbed my arm, the other opened the rear door. Get in. I didn't fight. Didn't scream. I let them push me inside, let them bind my wrists with zip ties, let them drive north out of the city. I kept my breathing shallow, panicked, exactly like a terrified waitress who'd stumbled into something she couldn't escape. The Nozaki estate materialized through bare November trees. A sprawling Mediterranean villa, all white stone and red tile, surrounded by walls that looked decorative but weren't. They dragged me through a side entrance, down stairs that smelled like old wine and newer blood, into a cellar that had been converted into something between a storage room and an interrogation chamber. Emily was waiting. She'd changed since the restaurant. No red dress now. Black pants, silk blouse, her hair still perfect despite everything. She looked at me the way someone examines a bug. Clinical, mildly curious about whether to crush it or let it live. Helen Brown. She pulled up a chair, sat down, crossed her legs. The heroic waitress. Moretti's newest pet. Tell me, did he fuck you before or after you led his enemies to his doorstep? I flinched. Let tears gather in my eyes. I didn't mean to. The tracker, I didn't know it was there. But you warned him anyway. Why? He helped me. My brother, he paid for. My voice broke convincingly. I just wanted to help him back. I didn't know it would. Where is he now? Emily leaned forward. Where is Moretti hiding? I let the silence stretch. Let her see me weighing my options, loyalty against survival. Then I whispered, Red Hook. There's a warehouse on Beard Street near the water. He's planning to leave the country. There's a boat coming tomorrow night. Emily's eyes glittered. She pulled out her phone, typed rapidly. Which warehouse? Building 47. The old coffee storage facility. The lies came easier now. Moretti had coached me well. Please, I told you what you wanted. Just let me go back to my brother. Emily stood, smoothing her blouse. When Moretti's dead, maybe. Dante. He called up the stairs. Send everyone to Red Hook. Building 47. I want it surrounded within the hour. She smiled at me then, cold and victorious. You should have stayed invisible, Helen. The cellar door slammed shut and I was alone in the dark. I counted seconds in the darkness. 3,000. 4,000. 50 minutes by my estimate, maybe more. My wrists ached from the zip ties. The cellar smelled like wine and mildew and fear. My own. Then the lights went out. Not just in the cellar. Everywhere. The thin line of light beneath the door disappeared. I heard shouts from upstairs, running footsteps, confusion. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was the signal. The door opened. A figure stood backlit by emergency lights, dressed in Dante's guard uniform, black tactical gear, radio on his hip. But I knew the shape of him, the way he moved. Moretti, I breathed. He crossed to me in 2 strides, pulling a knife from his belt and cutting through the zip ties. Can you run? Yes. Then run. We moved through the darkness like ghosts. Moretti knew the estate layout. He'd studied the security plans, memorized every exit. We passed guards scrambling to restore power, their flashlights cutting through the black. One spotted us. Moretti's hand shot out, a silenced shot, and the man dropped without a sound. We burst into the gardens through a side door. Cold air hit my face. November wind cut through my thin clothes. Moretti pulled me behind a hedge maze, his hand pressed against my mouth, his body covering mine as more guards rushed past. Then, in the distance, a sound like thunder rolling across the city. The explosion lit up the horizon. A massive fireball rising from Red Hook, orange and furious against the night sky. Even miles away I felt the percussion, a deep bass note that rattled in my chest. Moretti's warehouse. Building 47. Filled with Emily's best soldiers, all of them now dead or dying. Inside the estate someone screamed. Dante's voice raw with rage. They're not there. It's empty. It's a fucking trap. Moretti's lips curved into something dark and satisfied. They know now. We kept moving through the gardens to the outer wall. Takashi was waiting with a car, engine running. We climbed in and as we pulled away I looked back at the estate. Lights were coming back on. I could see figures moving in the windows. Dante, Emily, the remnants of their forces. The gallows tomorrow night, Moretti said, checking his gun. They'll still have it. Dante's too arrogant to cancel. He'll want to show strength, prove he's not afraid. And we'll be there, I said. We'll be there. He looked at me, his eyes reflecting the distant flames. Are you ready to finish this? I thought about the woman I'd been 2 weeks ago. Invisible, powerless, afraid. She was gone. Burned away in gun oil and blood and the taste of danger on my tongue. I'm ready. The ballroom glittered like a jewel box filled with vipers. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, men in tuxedos and women in gowns worth more than most people's houses. Crime lords from 3 continents, politicians who'd sold their souls years ago, all gathered to witness Dante and Emily's ascension. We entered wearing masks, mine silver and delicate, Moretti's black and sharp. The engagement party had a Venetian theme, which made our anonymity almost laughable in its convenience. No one looked twice at us as we slipped through the crowd. Emily wore white. Of course she did. A dress that clung to her pregnant belly, diamond earrings catching the light. Dante stood beside her in a white tuxedo, his smile too wide, too confident. He raised his champagne glass. To new beginnings, he announced. To family. To power. The crowd applauded. Emily leaned in, whispered something in his ear. They moved to the center of the floor for their first dance, and the orchestra began playing. That's when the projection screens flickered to life. Emily's voice filled the ballroom, crystal clear. 3 dots. Spine, left shoulder blade, right kidney. The moment he stands for the toast. Make it clean. I want him dead before he hits the floor. The dancing stopped. Every head turned to the screens showing phone records, bank transfers, text messages. Evidence of conspiracy, of betrayal, of murder plotted in cold blood. Dante's face went white. Emily's went murderous. Moretti removed his mask. Hello, cousin. Chaos erupted. Guards drew weapons. Guests screamed and scattered. Dante lunged for his shoulder holster, pulling his gun, swinging it toward Moretti. I fired first. The Glock kicked in my hands and Dante stumbled backward, red blooming across his white tuxedo. He looked down at his chest, surprised, then collapsed. Emily screamed. She turned on me, producing a knife from somewhere, her face twisted with rage. You bitch. He came at me fast, the blade flashing. I dodged left, but she was faster than I expected. The knife sliced across my shoulder, pain exploding white hot. We crashed into a table, champagne glasses shattering. She stabbed down. I caught her wrist, twisted. We struggled, rolling across broken glass. She was strong, desperate, fighting for 2 lives now. But I'd been trained by someone who played for keeps. I got my hand around the knife, turned it and drove it upward. Emily's eyes went wide. She made a sound, soft, surprised, and went still. Behind us, gunfire. Moretti's voice shouting orders. The smell of smoke as fire alarms began to wail. Someone had set the estate ablaze. Moretti grabbed my hand. How we run. We ran through fire and smoke and the ruins of Dante's empire, leaving bodies and betrayal behind us. The war lasted 3 days. Moretti moved through his territory like a scalpel, cutting out the infection that had tried to kill him. Dante's loyalists fell or bent the knee. The Italian families who'd backed Emily's play sent emissaries with apologies and tribute. The Korean factions who doubted Moretti's strength learned better. By the end of the week, the empire was his again, stronger than before, unified by fear and respect in equal measure. I stood beside him through all of it. Not behind him. Beside him. 3 months later, I sat in Marcus's hospital room watching him eat real food for the first time in weeks. The doctors had used the word we'd been afraid to hope for: remission. Complete remission. He still had treatment ahead, but his eyes were bright again, his laugh genuine. When he asked me what I'd been doing, I told him I'd found a new job. Better pay. Better hours. Better future. I didn't tell him about the blood on my hands or the bodies I'd left behind. Some truths are better kept in the dark. 6 months after the gala, I stood in Moretti's penthouse wearing a black dress that cost more than my entire year's salary at the Crimson Pearl. The gathered crowd was smaller this time. No politicians, no crime lords from other territories. Just the inner circle. Takashi. The key lieutenants. The people who mattered. Moretti stood at the center of the room, immaculate in a black suit, his dark eyes finding mine across the space. He raised his glass. To Helen Brown, he said. Who saw death coming and chose to warn a monster instead of staying silent. Who walked into fire because she refused to break. Who became what she needed to become to survive. He crossed to me, extending his hand. Not my property. Not my debt. My partner. My equal. I took his hand. The room applauded, but I barely heard it. I was thinking about the girl I'd been 6 months ago. Invisible, powerless, apologizing for taking up space. She was gone. Buried with Emily and Dante and all the people who'd underestimated what a desperate woman could become. No regrets? Moretti asked quietly, his lips close to my ear. I looked at him. This dangerous, beautiful man who'd given me a choice and then given me the tools to remake myself. I thought about Marcus, alive and laughing. I thought about the empire we now ruled together. I thought about the darkness I'd learned to navigate, to command, to own. None, I said. I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. I'd become part of it. And in the shadows I'd found exactly where I belonged.